outright lies that they peddled about our investigative work. As a result, Senator Johnson and I did what any good investigator would do. We gathered even more records to prove all these people wrong. Which brings me to the second theme. Senator Johnson and I will produce new records to show additional connections between the Biden family and the communist Chinese regime. Before we get to those records, I'm going to discuss the background of our investigation. We started this investigation last Congress. Then I was chairman of the Finance Committee, and at that time, Senator Johnson was chairman of the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. It began in August 2019. I started at that time an inquiry into a transaction involving Hunter Biden that was reviewed by the federal government's Committee on Foreign Investment. On September 23, 2020, Senator Johnson and I released our report. On November the 18th, 2020, we released our supplement to that report. Those reports were based in a large part on Obama administration government records and also almost a dozen transcribed interviews of government officials. In both reports, Senator Johnson and I made financial information public that hadn't ever been known before. Our report exposed extensive financial relationships between Hunter and James Biden and Chinese nationals connected to the communist regime. More precisely, these were Chinese nationals connected to the Chinese government's military and intelligence service. One of those individuals was a person by the name of Patrick Ho. According to reports, Hunter Biden said of Patrick Ho, quote, "I have another New York Times reporter calling about my representation of Patrick Ho." Then Hunter Biden says the F word, denoting a spy chief of China who started a company that my partner, who is worth $323 billion, founded and is now missing. End of that quote. We'll get into more detail with respect to Patrick Ho in future speeches. We'll do the same with Gongwen Dong, another close associate of Hunter Biden's, who was connected to the communist regime. Now, Hunter Biden's reference to, quote, "my partner," end quote, is an apparent reference to Yi Jinping. Yi had connections to the People's Liberation Army. Yi had a company called CEFC, which had multiple variations. Today and in future speeches, Senator Johnson and I will simply refer to that company as CEFC. Documents show that CEFC's corporate mission was, quote, "to expand cooperation in the international energy economy and contribute to national development," end of quote. Now let me emphasize that word national in that quote, national development. CEFC existed for the communist state. Indeed, records show that CEFC is dedicated itself to serve China's national energy strategy, developing national strategic reserves for oil, and now I quote, partnering with centrally administered and state-owned enterprises, end of quote. Records prepared by one of Hunter and James Biden's business associates, a James Gilliar, say the following about this company, CEFC. Quote, at the time, China was hungry for crude, but its state-backed companies were having difficulty closing some deals abroad. The optics of China's state-backed giants marching into a country to buy and extract oil weren't great for Central Asian politicians. This paved the way for private firms like CEFC, which can strike oil deals in Europe and the Middle East, where Chinese state-owned enterprises could bring political liabilities, end of quote. Documents also show that CEFC, quote, is building an energy storage and logistics system in Europe, end of quote, to connect China, Europe, and the Middle East. Now, you may ask why? Plainly, to serve, quote, China's ambitions to have overseas storage locations connected with world markets, end of quote. The document further states that CEFC's investments and their bank division has investments in the energy sector, quote, which are in tandem with the government's $4 trillion One Belt, One Road foreign investment program, end of quote. So then, CEFC operated under the guise of a private company, but for all intents and purposes, as an arm of the Chinese government. Hunter Biden and James Biden served as the perfect vehicle by which the Communist Chinese government could gain inroads here in the United States through CEFC and its affiliates. And these inroads were focused on Chinese advancement into the global and U.S. energy sector. Hunter and James Biden were more than happy to go along, of course, for the right price. So now let's turn to the first poster, which shows bank records that hasn't been made public before now. This is a portion of a document that we, meaning Senator Johnson and I, will release in full. The topic of this poster shows a wire transaction, August 4th, 2017, from CEFC to Wells Fargo Clearing Services for $100,000. Now look at the bottom of the poster. This is the underlying data of this transaction. It states, quote, further credit to Owasco, end of quote. Owasco is Hunter Biden's firm. Now, there is no middleman in this transaction. This is $100,000 from what is effectively an arm of the Communist Chinese government direct to Hunter Biden. So a second question to the liberal media. and my Democrat colleagues who accused us over the last 2 years of distributing Russian disinformation is this official bank document, Russian disinformation. Now, beyond this document, in future speeches, Senator Johnson and I will show you more transfers between and among such companies as CEFC, Northern International Capital, Hudson West 3, Hunter Biden's Owasco, and James Biden's Lion Hall Group. In doing so, please keep in mind the players in this game: Hunter Biden, James Biden, Yi Jinping, Gang Wen-dong. The Post failed to note that Tim Tebow predicated the investigation in a substantial part on liberal news articles as well as information derived from a liberal nonprofit. Then Attorney General Garland and Director Wray approved a full investigation anyway, which, as we all know, was contrary to standard procedure for moving ahead on an investigation. That Washington Post article occurred one day after I made the Trump investigation letter public, and one day after I made the July 25th Hunter Biden investigation letter public. Since Tim Tebow's exit from the FBI, I've noticed more news articles and reporting that hasn't been accurate with respect to the allegations that I've made public. Let me take this opportunity then to correct the record with respect to that inaccurate reporting. Some reports have noted that the Hunter Biden criminal probe is ongoing. Therefore, how can the allegations of Tebow shutting down investigation activity related to Hunter Biden be a credible? Well, this is the difference. The whistleblower disclosures to me relate to investigative activity and avenues of information that originated entirely separate from the ongoing Hunter Biden criminal probe. That's why the allegations that I made, that I've brought forward, are so very, very important, because we're dealing with a separate category of potentially criminal information relating to Hunter Biden that the FBI has within its possession. And the information received by the FBI was either verified or verifiable. Even so, based on allegations, the investigative activity was shut down by Special Agent Tebow and, of course, by others based on the false assertion that it was disinformation. How many times do we have this disinformation coming up as an excuse all the time with Grassley's investigations? Now, to be precise, FBI officials wanted to take action with respect to this separate investigative information that the FBI had in its possession related to Hunter Biden. However, Tebow blocked the FBI from doing what would normally be done. Accordingly, the investigative activity and information cannot be advanced as it should have been, which means the FBI could have gathered more evidence with respect to Hunter Biden, but cut bait instead. And the FBI and Thibault cut bait right before the 2020 presidential election. Since the information and activity was shut down, it wouldn't have been initially shared with any ongoing criminal code. That calls into question then what U.S. Attorney Weiss is actually investigating. It also calls into question what the FBI's Baltimore field office is reviewing and whether it's the full scope of evidence. Now, I've asked Director Wray about that whole issue. I asked him, quote, how can verified and verifiable information relating to Hunter Biden potential's criminality be shared with U.S. Attorney Weiss if it is shut down? End of my quote. We have no answer from Director Wray. At the Judiciary's Committee August 4th oversight hearing, Director Wray said that it's his expectation that such information would be shared with relevant offices. So, Director Wray, I have this question. What have you done to ensure that your expectation has been met? Because Director Wray's failure to answer, Congress is unaware of whether or not the FBI has finally shared full and complete information and investigative activity with any ongoing criminal probe. Therefore, without additional transparency from the government, there's a very real chance the Hunter Biden criminal probe doesn't include the full evidentiary picture. Now, how can the American people trust the results? Some have also questioned how an assistant special agent in charge like Thibault can have so much power to open and close investigative activities. Well, that's exactly what he did. And that power is often abused within the FBI. For example, on March 28th of this year, Chairman Durbin and I wrote a letter to the FBI about an audit. That audit showed widespread violation of internal policies designed to ensure proper handling of the FBI's most sensitive investigations. To read from my letter with Chairman Durbin, quote, the FBI reviewed 353 sensitive investigative matters, just under half of all such matters that were pending during this 18-month review period, and identified 747 violations, end of quote. In 45 investigations, the FBI didn't conduct or document a legal review prior to opening it. In 40 investigations, the FBI officials who opened a sensitive investigative matter didn't obtain approval from the relevant special agent in charge or even the assistant special agent in charge. Now, with those statistics, I fear that's just the tip of the iceberg. In conclusion, let's look at Thibault's recent statement and the allegations he didn't address. I think we have 5 or 6. First, he didn't address his role in opening a Trump investigation based on liberal news articles and information derived from a liberal nonprofit. Secondly, he didn't address his collaboration with Richard Pilger with respect to that investigation. Third, he didn't address efforts to water down the Trump investigation memos sent to Attorney General Garland and Director Wray, which they ultimately approved. Fourth, he didn't address the shutting down of the investigative activity and avenues of information relating to Hunter Biden. Fifth,